Good morning, Father's House. Thank you once again for joining us for our Sunday video service or our Sunday outdoor service, whichever the case may be, but you probably the video. Same announcements are just holding strong for us at the Father's House. The men's meeting resumed their Book of Romans study on Monday nights at 6:30 on Zoom. If you want to be part of that, let Pastor Carl or Pastor Carlos know and they'll get you hooked up on that. Our ladies group is still meeting at 6:30 on Thursday evenings on Zoom. So if you'd like to be part of that, give me or Deanna a call and we'll get you set up. We did have some new people come on this last week, so it was pretty fun. Also, we are holding outside service, so if you want to come and be a part of that, it's Sunday at 10 o'clock. You can even sit in your car now. We've got it set up so you can back your cars in, enjoy the worship, enjoy the message. We got a FM transmitter, I think it's called, so that you can tune your radio and listen to it on your radio too, if you'd like to do that. Keep your windows rolled up so you're nice and cozy. But we have actually had some beautiful weather. God has just blessed us with an opportunity to sit outside, enjoy His creation, and enjoy the worship and the message from the Father's house. So if you'd like to be part of that, come early so you can get your car parked, or bring your lawn chair and you can sit out there with me. Regular tithes and offerings this week. You know the drill. You can go to thefathershouse.org, click on the giving button, set it up as a one-time gift or a recurring gift. You can give to our missions that way also. I know Pastor Juan has been very appreciative of all those gifts that we've been sending. They've had really, really rainy weather. They're getting all our rain, I think, but they actually had floods down there in front of his house, but the church and the orphanage stayed dry, so that's good news. But all of your giving is much appreciated. I know these are tough times, and hopefully with this vaccine coming out, a lot of people will be able to get back to work and get their businesses open and get back on their feet financially. That would be the hope for 2021. Last week, I shared that Pastor Mario and his group is going through the book of Proverbs. They're reading one chapter each day because there's 31 days in January and there's 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs. So I challenged the Father's house to do the same thing, and the ladies group has been doing the same thing. So when we're talking about these different forms of worship, this book of Proverbs is a beautiful form of worship written by King Solomon, David's son actually, and how he spent time worshiping with God. So I'm going to share a little bit of chapter 10 because it's the 10th day, and then I'll just stop at a certain point and then you can finish it on your own. So Proverbs chapter 10. The Proverbs of Solomon. A wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish son is a grief to his mother. Funny, dad can be proud of the wise son, but the mother has to carry the foolish son. Ill-gotten gains do not profit, but righteousness delivers from death. The Lord will not allow the righteous to hunger, but He will thrust aside the craving of the wicked. Poor is he who works with a negligent hand, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a son who acts wisely, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who acts shamefully. Blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. The memory of the righteous is blessed, but the name of the wicked will rot. The wise of the heart will receive commands, but a babbling fool will be thrown down. He who walks in integrity walks securely, but he who perverts his ways will be found out. He who winks the eye causes trouble, and a babbling fool will be thrown down. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all transgressions. So I stopped at verse 12. You can take your Bibles and finish verses 13 through 32 and just spend some time in prayer and pondering what God has for you in this 2021 and what God has for the Father's house. Thank you.
Good morning. Glad to have you with us today on this beautiful day, and hope that you're having a good first of the year as we kind of rush into this year. I tell you, there's been some wild times here at Ridgemont High, hasn't it been? Man, we've seen just about everything happen. It just got worse this week, and I think we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that today. But if you haven't gotten your water yet, you might get that. That's what I have, water. Or if you're getting coffee or your breakfast, whatever the case might be, get what you want. Might pause the tape for a minute, go get it, come on back, and let's sit down and let's spend some time thinking together about some of the things that are going on in our society and what Jesus' perspective about things like this might just be. So go ahead and do that, and we'll get started here. I don't think I'm going to spend long today, but we'll see, because sometimes when I think I'm going to go short, I go long. And when I think I'm going to go long, I go short. But anyway, I think that it'll be short and maybe to the point. But I want us to reflect as Christians. And there's a couple of things that are making me kind of think about what I want to talk about today. And it's the idea of, in our society, I remember years ago in a Navigator Press book, it was a discipleship program that lasted for 2 years that you would take the summers off, but it was like 4 semesters of this Christian discipleship program that was available years ago. And in this, there was an article that was written, or an essay that was written, and it was called The Tyranny of the Urgent. And I was thinking about that as I woke up this morning, and I was thinking about things that are the immediate things in our lives, the urgent things in our lives, and the important things in our life. And here's kind of why I wanted to talk about that today as Christians, what Jesus has to say about where we are as a society. Now, a lot of times we think that, and we've been taught that Christianity or Christians or religion shouldn't be mixed with politics, or that we shouldn't influence people with our Christian philosophies and ideologies. And I think that's wrong. I don't think that that's true, and I don't think that's what the separation of church and state ultimately means, but we're not going to talk about that today. I mean, maybe some time in the future we'll talk about that. But I do want to talk about a couple of things when we talk about what happened here at the White House. I'm sorry, the White House with Congress when they were meeting, and how the Capitol was stormed, and so people got into front doors, and so now everybody's outraged in all kinds of different directions. And just when we thought everything was going to slow down, it didn't slow down. It just kind of accelerated to where it's just pandemonium and chaos. And it looks to me like any of our government officials don't really have the answers for the questions that are at hand in dealing with the riots that are going on, the protesting that's going on, and just the unrest in our society. The second thing that makes me want to talk about what I want to talk about today is the idea of how much stress we're under that we don't know that we're under because of several different things. Now, it's interesting because I just had a friend, actually I have 2 friends that in the last couple of weeks have passed. One of them passed because of COVID. I went to high school with him. He passed from the COVID-19 virus, and he had gotten it pretty bad, and was starting to feel better. And he was at his home, and he got up, and his girlfriend was there, and he said, "I'm feeling a little bit better. I think I'm going to go upstairs and change my clothes, or get dressed." So he stood up, and when he stood up, he had this odd look on his face, and his girlfriend said, "What's the matter?" And he said, she said, "Are you all right?" And he said, "No." Said, "Do you want me to call an ambulance?" And he said, "Yes." And he passed out, and he passed right there without ever taking another step. What had happened was it had to do with a blood clot in the lungs or in the brain or what have you, something along those lines. A second one is I just found out about a pastor friend of mine in Reno. These are both in Reno. A pastor friend of mine in Reno that I've known for years. And I found out that he passed away, and he was simply just took his dogs out for a walk, and he had a heart attack or a stroke, and he died right there as well. A pretty quick death. And it made me think of a couple of things about the idea of our life and how quickly they can be taken from us, and what our lives should ultimately be focused on. Now, and the reason I say that is because I think sometimes that in our busy world, there's so much chatter going on back and forth and everything going on and all this babble that's going on. And I think in some cases, as a society and possibly as individuals, that we've lost our way a little bit. And what I mean by that is we've lost our spiritual center. And so I talked about the idea of this idea of the immediate, the urgent, and the important. And when I'm talking about the immediate, I'm talking about the idea of the immediate when we wake up in the morning and the first thing we do is we turn on the news so that we can see what's going on. And it's all negative anyway. And we sit there and watch it for a while, or we listen on the radio, or we're involved in conversations with people over political issues or over the virus. And the only thing that we've had really the last year is we've had a lot of bad news and not a lot of good news. But what's happened is, because that's what's immediately before us, I think it's affecting us in ways that we don't even realize. I think many of us are under a lot more stress than what we think we are. I think that we've learned to deal with it in this last year, but I think that it's there. And so this stuff is immediately on us, and I think it's causing us in some cases to not react well. And I think that we're finding that in our society that it's starting, in probably the world as a whole, that it's really starting to take a toll, and we're seeing it with a higher level of agitation, a lot more fear, a lot more unrest. And I think it has to do with our news cycle, which is negative, which I lay that at their doorstep. I don't think that they should be doing that. And also the idea of what's going on with this virus and the political unrest in our society. So we're dealing with the immediate, and when we're dealing with the immediate, we sometimes get our eyes off of that which is important. The second thing I want to talk about is the idea of the urgent. And sometimes we live our lives, and what we live our lives is we always are doing the urgent thing. We're running around here. We're doing I got to go pay this bill. I've got to go shopping at the store. I've got to go get tires for my car. I want to watch this video. I've got to watch The Bachelor on TV or whatever it might be. I've got to watch this football game. And we're so busy in the urgent that in both cases, whether those things that are immediately before us and those things that are urgent in our life, that the thing that we've gotten away from, and I think that what we ought to be focusing on is the things that are important. I want to talk about that for a minute. So if I ask you the question, what are the important things in your life? Would you say the important thing in your life is to get up in the morning and turn on the TV and watch the bad news? Or would you say that the most important thing in your life is getting up and going shopping and buying this and buying that, or doing whatever it is, or the different running around that you want to do? Would those be the things that you would consider to be important? Or would those be the things that are urgent? And where's your center, or where's your focus on that? So I got to thinking a little bit about this. I've just really been thinking about it all week. And I've been thinking along the lines of how we live in a society of binary, a society which thinks in a binary fashion. What I mean by binary is we think in a two-dimensional way. Let me give you an example. I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican. I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat. There's no middle ground there where we can be anything but a Republican or a Democrat. And we see those things lived out all the time in life. We see that really with on social media. You see it when you see one person arguing with another person about a position, a political position, or some other position, and you see these counterpoints. And those are the only 2 points that exist in the conversation. It's either a Trumpster or you're a non-Trumpster. You're a Democrat, you're not a Democrat, whatever the case might be. And what's happened is it's put us into this way of thinking about things in a binary fashion. Let me give you another example of that. With the COVID-19 virus, there's people that say, well, it's not really that bad, and I don't know why we should have to wear masks. And the other side saying it is that bad, and we do have to wear masks. And one person saying, I'm not going to wear a mask, and the other saying, I am going to wear a mask, and we all ought to be wearing masks. And again, we see this binary relationship between the two. Now, I want to tell you that that's something that's been going on in human in the human mind and in human society since the very beginning of time. This black or white, and there's no middle ground. But I want to bring that to mind today because I think that what's happened is we found ourselves trapped in this binary world, and by doing it, it's caused this angst and this tension that we're all living under. Now, it's interesting because Jesus deals with this in a completely different way. And I think that that's when we really start talking about the idea of what's important and learning for us to see what's important and what are the things that should be those things that center us in everything that we do. So rather than kind of, I don't know how you would put it, but just kind of running around doing nothing, just being, I guess I could use the word busybody, but that's not even really what I have in mind, but just somebody that's just popping around from place to place to place to place, and they never really find a center in themselves and a center in God. And it's kind of that abstract idea that I'm talking about here. And it's the idea of finding our center, not in what's happening in the world around us, this idea of the storming of the Capitol, this idea of being a Democrat or Republican or anything else along those lines, because those things just tend to be unimportant, really, in the long-term thing. In other words, if you knew that you were going to die a month from now, would those things be the things that are important to you, or would there be something different that's important to you? So Jesus kind of deals with this thing in kind of a different sort of way. The first thing is, I don't know if you remember, but in the book of John, there's a story about Jesus with the woman that's caught in adultery. And they're trying to trick Jesus, which they always did. And they were always trying to trick Jesus into making this binary or to answering or to responding in this binary way of it's either right or it's wrong. And so the woman's caught in adultery, and if you remember the story, she's brought forward, they say to him, well, the law of Moses, because she was an adult, was caught in the very act of adultery, commands that she be stoned. What do you say? Now, Jesus could have said, well, if that's what the law of Moses says, that's right. What she did is wrong. Therefore, stone her. But Jesus doesn't do that, does he? What Jesus does is he changes the narrative, and he simply says, well, let me ask you a question. And he says, how about this? The law of Moses does say that what she did was wrong. But let's look at it this way. If any of you are without sin, why don't you be the one to cast the first stone, or to cast a stone at all? Well, because they all had sinned, they knew they couldn't cast a stone at her, because they too were guilty of some of the very things she was guilty of. Now, maybe they weren't an adulteress or an adulterer, whatever the case might be, but maybe they had other things that they'd done that they knew that was worthy of punishment and judgment as well. But what Jesus did was he refused to get in the midst of the fight. He simply said, there's another side to this, and there's other things that are at play, and I want you to consider those things. Eventually what it says, the story says, is they dropped their rocks and they left, and the woman was left with Jesus. And Jesus simply said, where's your accuser? He said, there's none around. And he says, go, your sins are forgiven. And it's a very profound story because he extends mercy and grace in the midst of a heated or potentially heated conflict with these religious leaders. The second one is when they were talking with Jesus and they said to him, by what authority do you think that you can teach and talk about these things of God? And Jesus, rather than getting into an argument with them, he just simply says, well, let me ask you a question. He said, well, what's the question? He said, well, was the baptism of John from God or man? And what happened was they knew that if they answered that thing in either way, on either side, that they were going to be wrong because they were caught almost in a double jeopardy, that no matter which way they answered, the ramification was going to be on them and not on him. And so what Jesus did was, rather than engage in those things that are immediate and those things that are urgent, what he did was he saw the things that were ultimately important. In the case of the woman caught in adultery, the thing that was important was ultimately her, her restoration back to the dignity of the woman that she was. And so he deals with the dignity of the person rather than the action. Today, I think in our society, in some cases, what we're dealing with is, or what we've lost is, we've lost to see people with the eyes of dignity. We've lost in some people's eyes, for some people, to see a dignity in President Donald Trump. Others refuse to see dignity in Joe Biden. But at the end of the day, the Christian message is always one of the dignity of man. Now you might say, well, why is that? And it's because we're created in God's image, each and every one of us. So we're living in a society that's this binary society of I'm right and you're wrong, whatever the case might be. What we've never ever stopped to realize, possibly, is the idea that God is interested in the dignity of everything that He's created. Everything that God created, He created for good. He didn't create it for evil. And it's up to us as Christians to be the promoters of that. And so today, I guess the question is are you finding yourself spending more time focused on the immediate or on the urgent, or are you finding yourself centered on the important? The important things in our life, Christians, is Jesus Christ, walking with God, and loving people. I'm hoping today that you'll say yes to that. It's probably time for us as Christians to turn the TVs off a little bit, to turn off the negative media, to turn off the negative attitudes that people are projecting at us, and focus and center our lives in the love of God, and through the love of God, extend that love to other people. And I'm hoping that today you'll say yes to that. God bless you, and have a great day.